Hello there! In this video, we're going to talk about the different types of layers in After Effects, together with parenting and basic camera movement. I'll be covering some of the basic layers more in detail in a later video, so this is mostly going to be a quick overview. So we're going to start by importing some objects that we can work with. I'm going to import these three again. And then I'm going to click here and make a composition and just name this test. So if you go to your timeline and right-click an empty part, this tab is going to show up. And if you go to New, you can see the different types of layers that exist. So we have text layers, solid layers, light layers, camera layers, null object layers, shape layers, and adjustment layers. So first, let's start by making a text layer. So when you make a text layer, it'll automatically generate an empty text. And then you can type here whatever you want. And this will also automatically pull up the character tab on the right here. And this is where you can adjust your color, your font size. The second box here is stroke color. So if I change this to red, and now I increase the stroke, now we have a border around our text. You can also make a text layer by using the text tool. So if you go to the top of the toolbar here, and then we use this tool, and we click on this big T here, you can click anywhere in your composition, and now you can make more text. So these are the basic text layers. So now let's look at the next type of layer. So we're going to right-click our timeline again, go to New, and the next layer is going to be solids. Solids are quite self-explanatory. They are literally solid colors. So we're going to click this, and this will pull up our solid settings, and here we can just choose whatever color we like. I will pick a nice pink color, hit OK. And now we have our pink solid on the screen. So you'll notice that when we make new layers this way, it automatically adds it to the very top of your composition. If I want to see our text, I could just drag this layer below the text. But when you have hundreds and hundreds of layers in After Effects, it can get quite tedious if you want to maybe drag it to the bottom, but it spawns at the very top. So usually what I do is that I click on the layer below where I want my new layer to be created. So let's say I want a new layer right on top of this pink one. Usually I will right-click on this number here or some sort of blank space, and then I can go to New and go to New Solid, and I will make this one blue. It'll be created right above the layer that you selected. And if you decide that you want to change the settings of the solid, you can pull up the solid settings by hitting Ctrl-Shift-Y, and this will pull up the solid settings. And now I can change this, so let's say a green. So if we right-click again to make a new layer, we go to New, you'll see that the next one is light. I'm actually going to skip over this one because it's typically used with 3D, which I'm not planning to get into in this series. So next, we're going to skip over camera and null object for now, and we're going to look at shape layers. So I'm going to go to New, Shape Layer. You'll notice that currently this layer is totally blank. Nothing showed up. So if you go to your shape layer and then go to the left here and open up this tab, you'll see that there is an Add button here. And when you click on the Add button, it'll give you options for shapes that you can make. So we can make a rectangle, ellipse, polystar, or path. So I'm just going to add a rectangle here. And if we open up the tab here, we can adjust the size or the position of our rectangle. We can round the corners. You'll notice that right now, our rectangle is completely transparent. It has no color. And the reason for this is because it doesn't have a fill or a stroke. So if you go here to the Add button, you'll see that there is an option for fill and stroke. So if we add fill, it's going to make our rectangle red. And we can also add a stroke to this as well to give it a border. So I'm going to add stroke. And you can adjust the color and thickness of the fill and the stroke respectively at the top bar right here. So we can change this to be a white rectangle. And I can make the border a bit thicker. So let's change the border color to, let's say, black to make it easy to see. And now we can see that our rectangle has a little black border. So you can also make shape layers by using the Shape Layer tool. So if you go up here and you left-click and hold on this little rectangle tool right here, it'll actually pull up a bunch of different shapes that you can make. And then you can choose, let's say I'll make the star tool, and I can click anywhere in my composition and it'll make me a star. And this time it will actually automatically give it a fill and a stroke. And you can make a bunch of shape layers this way. Oops. So you can just play around with this tool and make a bunch of shapes. So next, we're gonna look at adjustment layers. And what adjustment layers do is that any effect applied to that layer will be applied to every layer below it. So I'm gonna right click on our timeline, go to New, Adjustment Layer. So let's say I want to add a blur to the entire video. I could manually blur every single layer, but that would be quite difficult and quite tedious. So what I can do is instead use this adjustment layer and add the blur effect just to this layer. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to our Effects and Presets tab here. And usually the typical blur that we're gonna wanna use is the Gaussian blur. So I'm just gonna double click this to add it to our adjustment layer. So I've selected our adjustment layer and we're gonna double click this. And then now if I increase the blurriness, you'll see that both our text and our shape layers below are all getting blurrier. So it's affecting everything. If you notice also to the right of the adjustment layer, there is this little half-filled circle. And what this does is that it indicates that our current layer is an adjustment layer. So if I turn this off, the layer is going to stop working. And alternatively, if I apply it to a different layer, I can turn any layer I want into an adjustment layer. Alright, so for now I'm going to delete our adjustment layer. And before we get into the next types of layers, I first want to cover something called parenting in After Effects. So what parenting does is that it ties layers together, so that if you adjust the transform properties like scale or position to one layer, it will affect all of its children layers. So let's say, for example, I want, let's see, these two text layers to move together. Whenever I move this one, I want the other one to go together with it. So if you look all the way to the right, there's a section here called Parent and Link. And there's this little swirly icon that I like to call the Naruto symbol. Apparently, I guess it's a parent pick whip, but you can call it whatever you'd like. So if you grab this symbol and then drag it to the layer that you want to parent it to, so in this case, I'm going to drag it to our other text layer, it's going to parent them together. And you can also see that now under this column, it indicates that our layer is parented to the third layer. So now what happens is that if I move our whatever you want text layer around, the other text layer is going to move together with it. However, this only works one way, so if I move our other text layer, it's going to move independently. So you can use this to link two layers together. So now we're going to look at the two remaining types of layers, camera and null object. So first, we're going to start by making a null object. So right-click your timeline, go to New, Null Object. And you might be wondering why someone would want a literally empty layer. It's just a null object. But it's actually surprisingly useful, and I'll cover a bunch of different ways to utilize it in your workflow in a future video. But for now, we're actually going to use it together with a camera layer. So right-click, go to New, and then Camera. For the settings, I usually don't touch anything and I leave it as default, and then hit OK. So the camera layer will be your main tool in creating any kind of overall screen motion. You can think of it as resembling a literal video camera in reality. In reality, people can be walking around, but you hold your camera and you show only the part that you want to capture. So the camera itself has quite a lot of settings. So if we open it up, there's actually, if we open up the transform, there's like point of interest in here. There's a bunch of camera options like zoom, depth of field, focus distance, iris shape, and so on. So usually I don't actually edit any of the properties of the camera itself. And what I do is parent the camera to a null. So I'm just going to scroll back up and close this, and we're going to grab our Naruto symbol on the camera layer, and then we are going to drag this to our null 1. So to re-explain what this does, this makes it so that whenever I move this null layer, the camera is going to move too. So why would we want to do this? So to show you what's going on, I'm going to change the view here. Change this from 1 view to 2 views, and change the second view to top. So now we're looking at this scene on the left, but we're looking at it from a top-down view. So imagine you're just in the sky looking down. So we can see this cone shape here on the screen, and the tip of this cone is actually our camera right here. And the wide part of this cone is the visibility range of the camera. And this box in the middle is our null layer. So we could move around the camera itself. So I'm just going to open up the camera here, and I can rotate our point of interest, and you see the camera sort of moves around like this. But because there are so many parameters we have to look after and it will be a little bit difficult, instead I'm actually going to move our null. So instead of navigating the camera, what we're basically doing is we're telling it like, hey, You're gonna stare at this null, this blank box. Wherever it moves, just keep following it. If you had a camera, it would be like, look at this person, make sure this person is always in the center, and just always follow them. So if I open the position of our null, and if I move it to the left, the camera moves to the left too. If I move it to the right, it's also gonna move to the right. And there's none of this like camera rotating curvature that we saw when I was moving the point of interest. So with this, now we have our basic camera setup. I'm gonna set our view back to just one view. And then if it's zoomed in like this, you can just go over here and then go to fit to make it big again. So now let's open up the position property of our null. And if we move it around, we'll see, wow, absolutely nothing is happening. And this is because in order to utilize the camera, we actually need 3D layers. So to make a layer 3D, click on the empty box below this cube and it will turn that layer into a 3D layer. So I'm gonna make our null 3D. And I'll make all of our text and our shape layers 3D. So I'm gonna select all of them and then hit this box. And now they're all 3D. At first, it seems like nothing has changed, but if we now look at the position and the rotation properties, we'll notice that in the position, a Z-axis has been added here. And then the rotation, instead of just rotation, now we have orientation and XYZ rotation. So I'm gonna pull up our top-down view again. And we can see that as I adjust the Z position of our null, our camera is moving further and closer away from the screen. And everything looks like it's getting bigger and smaller. So now we can make a simple zoom out animation by keyframing the Z position of the null. So I'm just gonna zoom in a little here, and then I'm going to make one keyframe really zoomed in. So all the way here. And then I'm gonna go to 2 seconds and make a second keyframe zoomed out. I'm just gonna set this back to 0. And with this, now we have a simple zoom out animation. Lastly, to the right of the name of the layer, there's a symbol with 3 circles on it. This is for turning on motion blur, and this will automatically add a blur effect to moving objects. So I'm actually gonna select all of our layers and then just click the empty box to turn on the motion blur. And now we can see that there's a little blur effect added to our text as it's moving. It tends to make pre-rendering a little bit slower, so if you'd like to turn it off, you can turn off motion blur preview by hitting this bigger motion blur button here. So I'm just gonna click it and turn it off. Right now the motion blur is not visible, but when you render the video, it will be there. And with that, now you've learned about the basic layers, parenting, and cameras in After Effects. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe and let me know in the comments if you have any questions or any specific topics you'd like me to cover in a future video. Goodbye!